Ad honorem da parte dell'Università di Siena, Matthias Nagel, il re della sostenibilità, lo possiamo dire dal 1990, ecco che valore ricevere questo riconoscimento.
Okay, what it means, or
Yep.
I mean, it's incredible joy and honor to get this recognition, and it's also a celebration of decades-long of collaboration with the University of Siena, which has been an outstanding voice for sustainability for a long time, starting with Enzo Tiesi and now with Simone leading the charge on these very key topics, how to not just talk about it, but how to make it measurable so it becomes accountable, is a core principle. If we look at other domains, how strong metrics have been to transform things, like for example, if you see like the influence of GDP, that's obvious to many, but even if you think of the airline industries, and I think probably their overall metrics is to say we don't want people to crash in airplanes, and airplanes are getting safer and safer. It shows that metrics can really transform things. Now, how do we apply that to sustainability? That's kind of the big challenge, because that's even more fatal than the airplane crashes. How do we live well within the planet? So this is a big question, and being in collaboration with great institutions like Siena that put so much energy into kind of these big questions, it's just wonderful.
You say that we have to, how do we calculate sustainability in the world? In what phase are we now?
So we calculate more on sustainability than sustainability. Our premise is that in the end we have one planet, and that's our ecological budget. And so we can compare how much the planet can regenerate compared to what we as humans use. By now, that's the numbers for last year, we use 70% more than what Earth can renew. So that's like using 1.7 Earth. And most people realize we just have one, and then actually, for people to use the entire planet, maybe too much too, because there are many wild species as well. We're not the only wild species, the other wild species too. So probably even less should be used, and that shows there's an overuse. So our material dependence is too large. But we also, so that's kind of the dilemma. We are totally dependent on that resource. We cannot thrive without it. But at the same time, we cannot thrive with it either because there's not enough planet. And that's the dilemma. But there are ways out. So I always say overshoot is the second largest risk that humanity faces in the 21st century. The largest risk is not to react.
Do you feel worried about the fact that so many nations are using right now some kind of energies as gas or petroleum? Maybe USA instead, Donald Trump says this kind of thing, he wants to turn back to use such kind of energies.
What I'm most concerned about is not necessarily that they use fossil fuels now, but they don't realize yet that resource security, being able to secure the resources that require to operate, is a key parameter for economic long-term success. When I look at the economic development plans of countries, I found very, very, very few who have resource security at the center of their attention. To me, to use it perhaps too strong of a word, but I think it may actually be adequate, is to say I think these countries that don't have resource constraints at the core of their development plan are on a suicidal track.
Do you think Siena can be an example for the world, for example with Siena carbon neutral, that can be a good thing for Siena and maybe an example for the world?
Siena already is an example. It's one of the first cities that said we don't want to depend too much on cars. Also, it's a very dense city where you live, where your house essentially is more like your bedroom and the city is your living room. So people have a very full life in Siena, and it's a beautiful life. It's aesthetically very pleasing. People love to come here. If you compare that with a low density city where just to get some milk you need to get in the car and drive far away. So it shows that the way cities are structured, you can have far higher quality of life with far lower resource demand. And so that's the attraction too. So it's interesting. People love to come to Siena, so it actually shows it's attractive, and at the same time it has a structure, a way of living that is can be far more resource efficient. Of course, there are improvements to be made because you still depend on fossil fuels. You can make houses more energy efficient, and you can move away from the fossil fuels, and that's amazing that Siena is so committed to that. And I think the important thing is to see that as a self-interest too. You know, I say like the overshoot is not your burden; it's more your context. And if you say like the context, to use a metaphor, like the ocean could be your context. So if you know you'll be thrown in the ocean, it's good to learn how to swim.
Un'alta laurea ad honorem oggi possiamo dire al re della sostenibilità, quando l'Università di Siena con la sostenibilità effettivamente da tantissimi anni, da decenni, insomma, ci sta lavorando e collaborando.
Sì, proseguiamo in questo percorso, confermiamo una nostra caratteristica. Devo dire è stata 1 o 2 giorni, perché anche ieri abbiamo celebrato la giornata nazionale dell'università, rimarcando qual è il ruolo dell'università, rimarcando l'importanza della scienza. Oggi per l'appunto abbiamo l'onore, e ne siamo particolarmente felici, di conferire questa laurea magistrale in ecotossicologia e sostenibilità ambientale a Matthijs Wagernagel. È una laurea che ci onora, che prosegue un percorso di laurea ad honorem che abbiamo avviato già da qualche tempo. Ricordo gli ultimi nomi, Fauci, Rappuoli, Amitav Ghosh, Jan LeCun, sono tutti nomi davvero di prestigio, a cui si aggiunge Matthijs Wagernagel, che in questo modo ci dà la possibilità di continuare a rimarcare l'importanza della sostenibilità, l'importanza di studi scientifici sulla sostenibilità, che conduciamo in una serie di iniziative che nel nostro Ateneo hanno ormai una loro casa, un loro radicamento. Credo che sia importante e credo che si avvantaggeranno sia gli studenti e le studentesse. Ieri c'erano oltre 100 dottorandi che hanno partecipato ad un seminario con Matthijs Wagernagel. Questo a testimonianza di quanto è importante l'attività scientifica di questo studioso che abbiamo l'onore di avere fra i nostri alunni.